Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the first plenary panel, Building Communities of Belonging, Identifying and Engaging the Pressing Challenges of Immigrants and Refugees. My name is Clemens Sedmak. I'm here at the Keough School of Global Affairs at the University of Notre Dame, serve as Interim Director at the Nanovic Institute for European Studies, and my field is social ethics. I'm originally from Austria and am in the process of obtaining a green card. So I understand some of the pains that some people face. The topic of the first panel is to identify challenges immigrants and refugees are facing currently, trying to find a new home. A home is a place where you can stay and a place where you can grow. Our provost has talked about that, the search for a new home. I remember a book by the former chief rabbi of the Commonwealth, Jonathan Sachs, who talked about welcoming the stranger. And he made it very clear that you don't welcome the stranger by giving him or her a guest house, because if people want to stay, they are not guests. You also do not welcome the stranger by giving him or her a hotel room where they can stay for a while. Because if you want to stay, you don't want to have a hotel where you cannot make your own choices. If you want to stay, you need a building lot, a space where you can build your own house. And in order to do that, you need a community. Belonging to a community means that you do not have to justify your existence and that you can become a contributive agent who shapes the community. It takes a village and a community to welcome the stranger, and it takes strangers to shape communities. We should not forget, and Bishop Rhodes talked about that as well, that the earth belongs to all. In Catholic social tradition, we sometimes talk about the universal destination of goods. The earth belongs to all. Our first panel will explore some of the challenges that come with welcoming the stranger in current times. I will give you a brief introduction to our 5 panelists, and then I will give you the choreography. So we have 5 panelists with us. I introduce them in the order of their opening statements. Jose Arnulfo Cabrera is our first panelist. He's Director of Education and Advocacy for Migration in the Ignatian Solidarity Network. He is a 2018 graduate of Xavier University and a DACA recipient and an immigration activist. Our second panelist will be Luz Ostrognai. She's an immigration supervisor with Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Fort Wayne South Bend. She is Colombian-born, fully credited Department of Justice representative, and she has been practicing immigration law at Catholic Charities in Fort Wayne South Bend since 2003. Our third panelist will be Sharon Granados Mahato. She's Development Associate with Scalabrini International Migration Network. She is a social geographer, a native of Costa Rica, and has been dedicated to the protection and defense of the human rights of Latin American migrants, refugee seekers, and victims of human trafficking. Our fourth panelist will be Sam Centellas, Executive Director of La Casa de Amistad, a Latino-focused nonprofit community center here on the west side of South Bend, Indiana. Sam was born in Santa Cruz, Bolivia, and came to the States in 1st grade. And our final panelist will be Brenda Noriega, the Mission Educator-Promoter of Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers. She earned a master's degree in pastoral ministries from the University of Santa Clara and collaborates in multiple national committees representing young people, including the International Youth Consultative Body for the Dicastery of Laity and Family Life in Rome and the National Advisory Board for Young Adult Ministry. I would also like to mention that we had invited 2 further panelists, Hussein Maung, a former refugee from Thailand and Myanmar, and his wife, Edgar Escobar Martinez, who fled violence and corruption in Guatemala. And both of them cannot join us today because of a family emergency. We regret that very much, but would like to make sure that you understand we tried to include clients and refugees and have them have their own voice. What will happen now is our 5 panelists will give us an opening statement. The idea is 3 minutes maximum each, and then we have an interactive exchange. I would encourage you to use the Q&A button, and we will try to feed those questions to our panelists. At 10:55, each panelist will have a final 1-minute statement, and we try to end on time at 11 o'clock. Thank you so much again for joining us, and thank you to our panelists. And the order, as I said, will be Jose, Luz, Sharon, Sam, and Brenda. Jose, would you be kind enough to give us your opening statement, please?
Thank you, Clemens. In 2016, I was a community organizer in Cincinnati, Ohio. Right after the election, maybe a few weeks after, we received a call from a local elementary school that had a large student body of children of immigrants. The faculty and staff wanted me and the executive director of the organization I was working under to come and to talk to these students about what President Trump presidency would look like, and what would that mean for them and their family. We met with each individual grade from 1st grade all the way to the 8th grade. One of those interactions stuck out to me. I believe it was a 4th grade class, and a group of kids were all asking these questions. One young boy raised his hand and said, "What would I do if I go home and my parents aren't there?" I quickly told the little boy and said, "Well, look, here's these family preparedness packets that are in Spanish that you can give them to your parents, and so they can start preparing for what that would look like and what to do if they ever get picked up. And don't worry, we will find opportunities, a family member, or even a neighbor." And then the boy raised his hand and said again, "But we don't have any family member, and our neighbors have Trump signs on their lawns." That little boy's reaction of fear has been what this administration campaigned on and what it continues to push. In the last year, we have seen over 1,000 negative policies towards our immigration law. We have seen the president use language like shithole countries and go after one of the lowest hanging fruits. We have seen how the Supreme Court told him that you needed to reinstate DACA, but instead, he began ending the program by his July 28th memo. He's gone after TPS holders. He's created policies that unwelcome asylum seekers. And now we find ourselves in another election year with the hope of President Biden trying to win that election. And whether President Biden or Vice President Biden wins, it doesn't matter, because we have seen how this administration have created a culture of unwelcomeness, have created policies that make it harder and harder for undocumented immigrants, for asylum seekers, for refugees, and for legal immigrants to adjust their status. We need to look at our immigration system with love and compassion. We need to approach humane immigration system with 3 principles: treating immigrants with dignity, with respect, and with welcoming. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose, for the reminder of a microclimate that can produce fear and the importance of compassion and dignity. Luz, would you mind going next, please? Thank you and welcome.
Okay.
Luz, could you turn on your video, please?
They say that the host has stopped it. Okay.
Very good. We can see you.
Okay, thank you, Clemens. During the last 15 years, Catholic Charities of the Fort Wayne South Bend Diocese has been able to help secure legal status for about 500, 600 immigrants each year. And in order to better serve the growing need of our immigrant community, recently I have become fully accredited by the Department of Justice to represent our clients in removal proceedings. Currently, we provide a range of immigrant relief services, spanning help for victims of domestic violence by filing VAWA petitions for abused spouses and children of U.S. citizens or legal permanent residents, We help victims of violent crimes by filing EU visas, petitions. We assist in family unification by filing adjustment of status processes for those children of spouses or legal permanent residents or US citizens. We assist with humanitarian parole requests, inadmissibility waivers, consular processes, naturalization processes, DACA, TPS, religious, and more. However, no matter how well we do in the affirmative filing, we are just not able to make a dent in the need for those, traversing the precarious waters of immigration court. And I speak of the asylum seekers in particular. No right to counsel. As you might know, everybody, has the right to legal representation for the trial, but there is no right to appointing counsel for those facing removal proceedings in immigration court. So there are pro bono and law bono agencies available. They are not nearly enough to meet the demand. The result is a profound impact in asylum seekers, adversely impacting their ability to level the playing field in receive a fair trial. Not even talking about the detained immigrants, especially those held in removed locations. They face the additional barrier of access and representation from behind bars. So it's really heartbreaking. And I remember before 10 years ago that when we were not able to represent clients in court or we were not doing asylum cases, I was able to, do a screening and having contact with other agencies, that they were providing the services. We were doing a referral and we were able, to take care of the situation, at least not with all of them, but just with a big amount. Now we are not even able to do, to do that. So it's really heartbreaking. Lawyers, and what happened? For them, the asylum process in the US is complicated. It takes years to complete. Asylum seekers don't have access to health care or their benefits in the dependency of their process. They must secure their own counsel to get a first chance in obtaining the relief in immigration court. All of this can be especially harsh for survivors of torture, and other types of trauma. And what happened? In the Chicago Immigration Court, has seen nearly 1,500 cases of women with children since last year. Of those cases, less than 40% are represented by counsel. According to the data by the Syracuse University, that they say that less than half of the national rate. Among the 10 immigration courts across the country, only Dallas, I think it's Dallas, has the lower representation rate than our 7th circuit. Part of the problem is there is not a lot of need. It's that a lot of need and just a finite number of resources.
Thank you, Luz. A closing sentence. I'm just saying that you are at time.
Oh, still time. The ability to pay.
No, you have one sentence left. Your time is up. Sorry about it. Okay, thank you, Luz from Catholic Charities, South Bend, Fort Wayne. Reminding us of the legal hurdles and the challenge of either having no rights or no access to rights. And we move on to Sharon, Development Associate of the Scalabrini International Migration Network. Sharon, please. You're still muted. Thank you.
Thank you, Clemens. Good morning, everyone. Greetings from the Scalabrini International Migration Network. I'm glad to be in here today sharing this wonderful panel with a great colleagues and people that we work every day. So from our global perspective that comprehensively includes the response to the emergency and programs on effective integration for people on the move, we have seen at this time of multiple crises for migrants and refugees, how the current pandemic has brought to light the injustices, inequalities, and social gaps that widen with this situation. But on the other hand, it also shows again how migrants and their family continue contributing substantially to the development and economic, social, and cultural innovation of host societies. In that context, and to continue building communities of belongings, the Scalabrinians confirm the challenges and project the effects post-pandemic in the mid and long term in the following key areas. The first one area is the financial stability and job creation. We need to act quickly and provide innovative solutions to support labor market resilience, adaptation to unemployment, and the loss of income, especially for informal and undocumented workers. The Scalabrinian entrepreneurship and job creation model is an efficient way to do that. The second area is the access to food. We need to responsibly assure access to nutrition and continue to reverse malnutrition in countries of origin and host communities. SIMS programs on promoting integration and skill certifications are an opportunity for strengthening resilience and adaptive capacity. The third area is the healthcare and decent housing. We need to continue expanding programs on primary healthcare insurance, social security, and decent housing. Local programs in these areas need resources to increase their capacity and continue advocating to achieve sustainable financing. The fourth key area is the advocacy and policy coordination. We need to continue promoting sustainable actions, programs, and initiatives for protecting migrants and refugees' rights. We encourage today the Catholic institutions to act as leaders on the advocacy agenda post-COVID-19. And the fifth key area, and no less important, is the operational and programmatic stability of Catholic institutions. We need to guarantee the operational stability of Catholic institutions at local levels. Two, number one, expand and strengthen their institutional capacities. Number two, to promote and create new programs according to the real needs of our target populations. And third, to adapt our work on protection, empowerment, and integration in light of current challenges and opportunities in this moment here in the United States and all around the world. Thank you. Clemens, you're on mute. Yeah.
I just noticed that because Teresa muted me behind my back. So thank you, Sharon, for reminding us of those key challenges, including the need for stability and support structures and ongoing advocacy. We move on to Sam from La Casa de Amistad here in South Bend. Sam, the floor is yours.
Hi, so I'm Samuel Centellas. I work at La Casa de Amistad. It's a Latino community center in South Bend, Indiana, and we do everything from a bilingual preschool to youth programming to a legal immigration clinic, adult English classes, and all types of services in between. And so I'm talking today about the importance of creating belonging for immigrant communities, especially, for refugee or undocumented communities who often tend to kind of have the most need and least trust. And when we think about, from the La Casa standpoint, when we think about creating belonging, it's about how do we create a community that trusts itself, that trusts each other, and that more importantly feels welcome in a space. And I'll talk a little bit about why that's important, but I wanted to share ways that are critical to doing that. And so one is making sure that as a community, you're learning to celebrate the positives and benefits that an immigrant community brings, and celebrating their culture, and not just food's a good one, but celebrating all parts of culture that immigrant communities bring. And then just making sure that when we talk about immigrant communities, that we talk about them from a positive standpoint. So the other piece is, creating advocacy to help build trust with the community is a core part of what we do. And that's important to also help build trust so the community, the immigrant community feels welcome and feels, as I love that opening statement talking about, feels at home, right? They're not in a hotel, right? This is home. This is where they live. This is where they've chosen to be, where they want to be. And so it's important to build that sense of belonging. A couple of reasons why that's important is we saw that espoused now through one language or action during this pandemic is, finding out things. I'll use a really easy example, are things like access to healthcare. Access to healthcare has been a major challenge for immigrants, the undocumented, for refugees, whether understanding what things they could qualify for, what they can't qualify for, what type of services might put them at a disadvantage later, and trying to understand public charge and all of that. And then so when a pandemic hits and people need healthcare, and to figure out where to go, if they didn't already have places that they trusted, where do they go? And so that building places of belonging as a core foundational piece first is what then allows services when they're most critically needed to be able to happen. And so oftentimes, immigrant communities create these kind of underground networks of supporting each other. And it's important to bring those things to surface for people to know, like, you can talk about what clinics you go to and what places will, accept your matricula to check in and whatnot. So then the last piece I wanted to add is, I know I'm about out of time here, is that using these opportunities for advocacy. So for us, where we were, thrown in the world of having to come up with programs and services and ways to continue to meet needs, it also was critical that we talked about these things. So it was like, this is why in Indiana, undocumented can't get driver's licenses. So this is why we need to be able to have people have documentation that shows that they're a resident here, so they could go get a COVID test, because it's better for everybody in the community. And so it allowed us to jump out in front of some issues that we've been wanting to talk about for years and have been, and it helped amplify that. So we also took an opportunity to use the pandemic as a way to advocate for things we've been fighting for years, and use this as a great example to say, see, healthcare for immigrants is something that impacts all of us. And it's why we need to all care about each other's health. We all need to care about each other's education. We all need to care about each other's well-being, and to work on those things together.
Thank you so much, Sam, for reminding us the importance of trust, which is this very fragile plant that takes a lot of time to grow, helps us to feel welcome and get us a sense of belonging with access to informal or local knowledge. And then it's easier to access the structures, even under pandemic times. Thank you so much. Our last panelist will be Brenda from Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers. She will address the challenges that parishes face. Brenda, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Clemens. Good morning, everybody. So when it comes to challenges, there are two things that come to mind, but I cannot just not mention Pope Francis, right? And especially as a Catholic minister. So I want to start and open my statement with a quote from Pope Francis on Christus Vivit, paragraph 93. Pope Francis says, however, the stories of migrants are also stories of encounter between individuals and between cultures. For the communities and societies to which they come, migrants bring an opportunity for enrichment and the integral human development of all. Initiatives welcome involving the church have an important role from this perspective. They can bring new life to the communities capable of undertaking them. And I think this is key when we make feel the immigrants and the newcomers, right? When we make them feel welcome, and Sam mentioned amazing ways to do so. And so I think many times we forget as organizations and even as parishes or Catholic institutions that in the Catholic social teaching, we have both charity and we have justice. And also the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it says that charity is a love of, it's a proof of love, immediate love, as in justice is a long-term love. And so when it comes to charity, it's not only the clothes, it's not only providing immediate relief, but what about helping them in the process of adapting, right? Teaching them, just Sam mentioned it, teaching them to get a driver license, requesting less documents, remembering that they many times come with nothing, right? But their hopes and their dreams. And when we consider their hopes and their dreams, the challenge here is how can we help them to recognize that they also have something to contribute to this country? Because the political climate, as Jose was talking about, it's about fear, and it's about you are a burden more than you are a gift to this country. But Pope Francis is saying you are a gift to this country, and it's an encounter between cultures, and it's an encounter between people. So the challenge for parishes is that many times these services, whatever services are in the parishes, they are centralized in the parishes, but it also happens for organizations. Many times we are expecting the people to come to us and to come to our office and to come to our buildings. But what Pope Francis is saying is that we need to go to where the people are, and we need to go and encounter them as well. And we need to help them to go through an entire transition of arriving to a new culture. When it comes to political campaigns, I think the challenge is, or the services of advocacy. Right now, everybody is advocating for citizens to vote. And just last night, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who is DACA, and he was telling me in tears, all these diocesan programs and webinars, nationals, they keep pushing for people to vote. But what about me? I cannot vote. They are not making me part of the process. What's going to happen with me? So thank you very much. Let's think about them.
Thank you so much, Brenda. I didn't want to cut you off, but that's my role as the moderator. Thank you to our 5 panelists. Thank you, Brenda, for reminding us of justice is long-term love. And people who come to us are gifts, and that's the way we encounter them is encounter, as Pope Francis said. We have already a few questions, and the first question is for Luz. Luz, the question is, rather than expand the use of costly immigration detention, what should the government do? What should the government do, Luz?
Well, there's so many things that the government can do. And one of the, I'm going to just to mention 2 of the biggest one, it would be definitely to support the access to and funding for legal representation in asylum and removal proceedings. I think that would be the first one and the most important.
Access to funding, okay, yes. Mm-hmm.
And the second one is definitely to ensure that CBP, Custom Border Protection, and Immigration and Custom Enforcement staff carefully explain appearance, obligation, and details in a language that the asylum seeker or immigrant fully understand, because we have an issue with that too.
We know that from hospital ethics as well. Talk to us in a language that we can understand, especially if the language is not our mother tongue. Thank you, Luz. Another question to the Catholic community here, and maybe I would ask Brenda to take this question. Which are the challenges in integration and community building to LGBT migrants, asylum claimants, and refugees? Have you been providing any specific service taking into consideration the sexual orientation and gender identity of your clients? Maybe Brenda, if you give it a try.
You gave me the most difficult questions of all. I think that is a challenge overall for the church still today, regardless of them being migrants or refugees. That's just still a challenge. So no, so far I don't know of any like surveys and anything, but I think it applies the same sense, right? And as a church, we are always welcome to, we're always called to welcome everybody. But I think when there is a migrant and refugee factor, we still, regardless of their sexual identity, we still have to provide the same services, I think. So.
Okay, anybody else on the panel who would like to comment on the sexual orientation question from a Catholic service perspective? Sam.
Well, I wouldn't say Catholic service perspective. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, non-religiously affiliated, but I think that the trick with a lot of services that are set up for migrants is that a lot of them do have a religious background, right? And so because we have a priest painted on the mural on the outside of our building. And so I think it is trying to make sure that you're cognizant of the things that could put people off when they're coming for service. And that could be, religious iconography, or, how do you talk about things? And so it's important to watch the language that you use. We did a big No Human Being is Illegal campaign as a way to just think about languages and terms and words we use. So trying to be, as an organization, progressive, to be as inclusive as you conceivably can for everybody.
Thank you so much, Sam. I would have a question for Jose, if I may. The question is, in a Biden administration, where would you begin to mount an advocacy campaign, taking into account the Obama administration's immigration policies?
I was just looking at that and hoping I wouldn't have to ask that. I think, there have been so many changes to our immigration system in this last 4 years, and not just culturally in terms of people around the country, but also culturally in the agencies that handle immigration, like ICE and CBP and USCIS. So I think it's not going to be, there's not just kind of one cut way, which is why I said we need to approach this with the the mind of dignity and respect and welcoming, and do our best. And we have to recognize that the changes that this administration has done, we are going to see it for generations. And we also we shouldn't think of this as, let's try to go back to an Obama era policy, because when I started organizing was during the Obama era, and that era was not welcoming towards immigrants and gave us a lot of scars and a lot of trauma and family separation. And the first 2 years, let's not forget that the first 2 years of the Trump administration, they got a lot of the policies and kind of the system that the Obama administration put, and they put them on steroids, and they really blew it up. And these last 2 years, they've just been releasing policies that we had never thought could ever done. So it's going to take some time. There's no clear cut, but we just have to approach this with the idea of treating immigrants with dignity, respect, and being welcoming towards them.
Thank you, Jose. If there are no urgent other panelists' comments, I would like to ask a question to Sharon, if I may. The question is, I appreciate the distinction between charity and justice as a way of thinking about the challenges faced by immigrants and refugees. Could the panelists, and I ask Sharon here, speak to approaches that address structural change? Structural change, Sharon. Any insights? You're muted. You're still muted. Here we go.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So from our perspective, our services are addressed to everyone without distinction. You know, when we talk about the LGBT communities, migrant, refugees, first displacement, even seafarers, our work go addressed to these populations. And charity, when we talk about charity, is for those underserved population, the people that do not have access, but also we advocate for the justice on how they can access to these services and how we can promote how the institutions, agencies, and organizations at the local level can commit to provide the services for and access for these people at the local level, but also at national level. So I think the distinction between charity and justice is on how we see it from our perspective, from the church and from the Catholic institutions. The charity has been there always, you know, from the pastoral services, but also from our centers of services with direct contact with the people in the communities. We have the justice. We advocate for the justice. We advocate to promoting the image of immigrants, you know, for the structural change. We cannot change the things, we cannot change the politics, but we can continue advocating, promoting, and creating awareness of the immigrants and their role in the hosting society.
Thank you, Sharon. Advocacy is the key point. Any other comment on structural change from anyone, maybe Luz or anyone?
I might give just a quick point that I make in general. And I think that's, you know, also people talking about, you know, Jose's great comment about, you know, oftentimes folks kind of wax poetic about how great Obama was to immigrants or whatever, right? And so I think in general, when we talk about things, the history, we talk about this being an immigrant nation, the United States has always hated immigrants, right? We called the Polish dumb, the Irish drunks, the Italians criminals, and now we're doing it to Mexicans, Central Americans. We're doing it to people from the Middle East, right? And so I think that's part of, we have to restylize, like we want to move to a better, right? We don't want to move to some past fictitious good that existed, right? We want to move to a world when everybody welcomes everybody. We all value each other for what we bring to the table. So I think we have to be careful about that when we talk, especially because this is a very politically charged environment. To just say, you know, like we're all human beings, we all love, we all want better for our children than we had. We all want fair access to opportunity, and we want to live in a just world, and we should all strive to try to create that.
Thank you so much, Sam. I have a question for Brenda. Brenda, the question is, how can parishes get past the why can't they be like us in the sense of instant assimilation? As Pope Francis has said, we are called to integrate. There's a difference between integrate and assimilate. Brenda.
Yes, so I think and this comes to everyone, and right, it's not only the parishes. I think it's helping the people lift up their talents. We need to showcase the talents of those who arrive. Like Pope Francis says that everyone who comes to the country is enriching the country. And so when we show them what they bring to the country, that's when you learn to recognize their gifts and their talents instead of wanting somebody to change. However, I think why they cannot be like us, I think I'm assuming this comes from this comment can come from somebody in the most privileged position, right? Like more in the white supremacy kind of thing idea. But I've also heard these comments from Hispanic Latinos who are born in the United States, and they feel frustrated with newcomers. I am an immigrant. I was born in Mexico, and I have both sides. Growing up in church and away here in the United States. And I had those who wanted me to just be more American and to lose my accent. And I wanted others who wanted me to embrace my accent. So, and because that was embracing who I was, right? And embracing my roots and not forgetting where I'm coming from. So I think why it happens is just because we are not recognizing the person as number one, a human being, and recognizing the person as with all their gifts and their talents. And so we think that we have something better to offer just because our reality might be better. But it comes from a point of love.
Thank you so much, Brenda. And obviously some parishes are better at, integrating people and accommodating pluralism than others, which brings me to the next question that we have here. And the question is, what position does the Catholic Church take on the issues of racism globally? And maybe we take the next question together with that. So what position does the Catholic Church take on the issues of racism globally? And beyond framing this around treating immigrants with dignity and respect, what is the role of the Catholic Church in pushing for less reformist approaches and advocating for abolishing prisons and ICE? So Catholic Church's position on racism and Catholic Church's role in abolishing prisons and bringing some reforms. Why don't I start with Luz? Catholic Church's position on racism and its role in addressing reforms. You are muted. I can see you, but I can't hear you. Now I can do that.
Okay, well, the Catholic Charities, and the bishop was, addressing this, just this morning in the opening. The racism is absolutely, I'm tolerant. Is something that is not. It doesn't really come in the Catholic, it's not even part of the Catholic teaching. We are, this is just about, it's just about integration. It's just about acceptance and, love to one another. We understand, regulations in other stuff, but this is, from the perspective of the Catholic Church, is just not placed in any way for racists in any of that stuff.
Thank you, Luz. Jose.
Yeah, I think that when the assimilation is a big part of one of the ways where the church can ensure to work against anti-racism work. And when we look at these institutions, when we look at phrases like abolish detention, abolish ICE, those phrases, they're more of talking about how the system is wrong and how the system was built on the idea of racist ideas of treating immigrants, denying the treatment of dignity and respect towards immigrants. And so there's a saying in Spanish called, no puedes enderezar un palo chueco, meaning you can't straighten a crooked branch. And so if something started with the idea and the intention to be used for racist acts, then it must be abolished. Similarly, when we look at how the concept of citizenship was brought in the very first early period of the US, and the idea that citizenship was only given to white, free, land-owning men, we have to understand how these systems are being built, and the working to dismantle them is working to remove the racism that is structurally built. Similarly, with when people say, why don't you assimilate? As a DACA recipient, assimilation was part of my growing up. That's what this whole movement has been about. The idea that this is our home and we've been here since I was 4 years old. It happens naturally. And we have connections, just like everyone loves to celebrate St. Patty's Day. It's all our connections, and we celebrate our own individually in our own way because it's beautiful and it reminds us where we come from.
Thank you, Jose. I saw Sharon nodding. Do you want to add something, Sharon?
Yeah, thank you.
You're muted, Sharon. You muted yourself.
I am here.
So
I just want to remember to all of us here that assimilation is a mechanism of protection that all of us as immigrants use at the beginning of our journey as immigrants. You know, it's like it's a protection. We try to assimilate with the hosting culture. So when the time passes and we find the tools and we find the right people or the good or bad experiences, we start to integrating and adapting to a new community. So what I'm saying that, because I think the role of Catholic institutions and the role of grassroots organizations is fundamental. It's critical to provide immigrants, refugees, and forced displaced people the tools, the right information, and the responsibility answers that they need to effectively integrate in host communities. If not, we will continue having people that try to assimilate to the American culture or any hosting community culture. So we are in that context, we are not creating communities of belonging. We're creating communities of people that are doing what the others do.
Yeah, of assimilation. Yeah.
Exactly. So my idea is our role as an institution, as a Catholic institutions and local organization is critical. We need to continue working on that.
Thank you, Sharon. That's an important distinction, communities of belonging versus communities of assimilation. May I ask maybe a question to Brenda, going back to racism. Here on campus in Notre Dame, we have a task force looking into systemic racism and hidden racism, even here on campus. Do you think that the Catholic Church is credible by your experience when it comes to talking about racism or speaking out against racism? Because there may be, some hidden racism within the church as well.
So definitely, the USCCB, the bishops of the United States, have released a statement saying racism is a sin. And we as a church do not agree with racism, and it's not okay. When you talk about credibility, I think credibility is, won by action, not just words, right? And so the bishops have their heart. My experience with bishops has been very positive, with all honesty. The bishops I have encountered and that I have served under, they have been great. And that is my experience, and I cannot speak other than my experience. However, when it comes to ministers in the local parishes, we also go through racism in our parishes, and that is the truth. And we also live a structural racism within our parishes many times. And however, the bishops, when it comes to the institution, right, when it comes to the USCCB, there is a clear statement about racism being a sin. And we have also trainings in many dioceses. The Diocese of San Bernardino, where I am from, definitely we have trainings on ending racism, and there's a big effort for that. So we also have them in many other parishes. And so the bishops, the USCCB has made a great effort, huge effort on ending racism, not only within our own structure, but in society.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brenda. Any comment from anybody else? I would have another question. Okay, the question is this. From listening sessions conducted in 2018 among Hispanic Catholics in Western Washington State, emerged a call to educate white Catholics in anti-racist discrimination practices, because this reality was just as present in the parishes as in the community. Do your organizations view this as a part of your role in building community, or do you partner with others to address this critical issue? So we are talking about educating white Catholics in anti-racist discrimination practices. Any takers for this question? Maybe Sam, you're nodding. You're not representing a Catholic organization, but you have something to say.
Yeah, so I think it's critical for anybody to be involved in anti-racist education and work. And a couple of things that I think organizations, and we've tried to do a lot of this, and it was a fear for us as an organization up front, as a fundraising organization, right, to tackle some very complicated topics, some things that could make people edgy, but we did it. And so generally nonprofit organizations tend to just bring to them the people who agree with them, right? So if you want to help immigrant children in school, come volunteer with us. If you hate immigrant children, I don't want to hear from you, right? No, I want to go talk. I need to be involved in those conversations, right? We can't just say, if you agree with me, come hang out with me and we'll all kumbaya and sing songs. So we have to be involved in that education of saying, we want to create at least more advocates, or we at least want to help educate advocates in ways that they can then, like waterfall the work to other people. But we can't continue to just say, yeah, we know there's a ton of racist people out there and we just have to hope they eventually go away. And they're not going to go away unless we do something about it. And so I think church communities are a great space to do that because, everybody's going at least once a week, right, to listen to a message, and you have a captive audience and you have an opportunity to do these things. And I think it's critical for the church to do that in order to maintain the attention of the community.
Thank you, Sam. Luz, you wanted to say something, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Adding to what Sam was saying, the education part, we do that here at Catholic Charities. We go to churches, we go to schools, and it's so important because sometimes when you see all this hate and all the stuff, from, why, and actually sometimes Catholic people, it's because it's the ignorance about, the processes of how people get here, or what is the situation. When you go in detail and explain them, the whole thing, what people had to do, and just educate them. It's just about education. It's just amazing how, their perspectives change. And then they just, after a presentation, after we have, this conversation, we have people, coming back and they say, how can I help? And, and it's just education. We are, and this is, I think, it's an obligation for, the Catholic institutions, churches, agencies to really advocate for education, especially with our, white folks.
Oh, thank you, Luz. Obviously, education of the heart as well as education of the mind, because a lot of racism is on this level of perception and bias. And a book that was quite widely discussed on campus here was White Fragility from Robin DiAngelo, talking about white people having such a difficult time talking about racism because they want to feel good, because they are against racism, but at the same time, they may be benefiting from the system. Which brings me to the next question, friends. And the question is there a Catholic approach in helping immigrants that makes it unique? Is there a Catholic approach in helping immigrants that makes it unique? Jose, maybe you have a Catholic insight.
I would say, especially in the Latinx community, it's celebrating a lot of traditional kind of celebrations that you see in Catholic, like Posadas, Dia de la Virgen de Guadalupe, Dia de los Muertos, celebrating, learning about that culture and allowing people to celebrate it. But I will say that at times, and I've also seen parishes who've done that, you also have to approach it with an open mind, with a lot of education to understand why these systems, because at least in the Mexican Catholic world, a lot of our celebrations are very connected to actually a lot of religious beliefs that were found in Native American indigenous tribes like the Aztecs and different tribes. And so helping to understand those those meanings and celebrating that, because it has become now a part of Catholicism in Latin America. And in the US, that doesn't exist. So I think that's one unique way.
Excellent, thank you. Brenda, do you want to add something, or Sharon? Brenda first, maybe. Unique Catholic approach.
No, I think when it comes, like he said, popular piety, right? But getting to know why. The bishops say that popular piety, and especially also the new directory for catechism, it also says that popular piety is a good approach to the faith. However, it also needs to be explained to not fall into, into like other practices, right, for saying it that way. But when it comes to immigration, I think is the Catholic approach is that we see the person for whom they are. That is, as Catholics, is a human dignity, recognizing the human dignity of the person. So Pope Francis reminds us of not doing systems, right? It's not a systemic approach. It's more of a personal approach. We don't focus on programs, or we should not focus on programs. Pope Francis says we should focus on the person. And so when it comes to the person, it comes the peripheries and recognizing each one of the peripheries. So.
Thank you, Brenda. Even though we said advocacy on the structural level is still compatible with the personalist approach of encountering accompaniment. Sharon, do you want to add something briefly to the unique approach?
Yeah, very brief. Just I'm 100% agree with Brenda and Jose when they say that how the culture is part of that approach, right? And I think people comes to our centers and our shelters because they find a trust and reliability space where they can rest. You know, every program we have in our centers, no matter what, for legal assistance, mental health programs, ESL, or any other program, is people comes here because they find a space in when they can talk about their experience in where, because we do not judge them. We accept them as they are. So I think that what makes us unique. And it's very interesting to, just as an example, how we have in the communities, a lot of agencies that provide the same services, but the people comes to our Catholic centers and organizations because they feel welcome, they feel protected.
Thank you, Sharon. And I think that's an important key to building communities of belonging. You accept people for who they are without labeling them and then putting categories on them. Friends, we are at 10:55, which means we are in our last stage of this panel already. We have closing statements, 1 sentence per person. That's the idea. And maybe we take the reverse order of our opening statements, starting with Brenda, then Sam, Sharon, Luz, and Jose, if you don't mind. Brenda, what would be your final call to action?
To be leaders who are not afraid of the wounds of those who are right, and to leaders who accompany in processes and not just in a series of activities or a series of services, but real processes that recognize the entire holistic human dignity of the person. Beautiful.
Thank you, Brenda. Sam.
Yeah, for me, the key part is important for all of us to recognize that we can't solve this, that everybody has to solve this. And that means working with the people who are impacted, working with the people who can help, and working with the people who are working against you, right? To figure out a way to fix this. And so it's important that we engage other people in our work and find ways to do that in all different avenues if we're going to help make change.
Thank you so much, Sam. Sharon.
Yes, I think Catholic institutions and congregations can increase their potential of services, but we need to strengthen our inter-collaboration and go beyond isolated actions to articulated responses. That would make a big difference.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Luz.
I'm going to use one of the quotes of my favorite Justice Ruth. Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you.
That's beautiful. Can you read that again? It's so beautiful.
Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. It has always been my favorite, so I always keep that in mind.
Thank you. Jose.
Go out and vote, first thing. And continue to advocate for immigrants. And when you advocate with the idea of ensuring that policies and legislation is seen through the eyes of dignity, respect, and welcoming towards individuals.
Thank you so much, Jose. We are at 10:57, which means we have 2 more minutes. If anybody wants to make a final comment, I would give you the opportunity now.
I just want to mention the name of the document. I think I saw one of the questions asking. The document is called Christus Vivit, or Christ is Alive in the translation in English. And please read it. Paragraphs 90 all the way to 94 is specifically on migration.
Beautiful. Christus Vivit, Christ is alive, which is not just the name of a document, but it's our belief. And with this belief, we carry on our work, building communities of belonging, where, as we have seen, the key thing is trust, accepting people for who they are, seeing the humanity in everybody, understanding that the earth belongs to all, and that the privileges that we have accumulated were not intended to be privileges by God. At the end of this panel, I want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much, Luz and Brenda, Jose, Sam, and Sharon, for the time you took and the preparation. Thank you for the technical support that we have received. And please, be faithful to the rest of the conference. There are many more things to come. We are at 10:59, and I would say let's close this panel, thanking everybody who was involved, including the audience, with these important questions. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.